Oh God. Oh God. What can I say? Uh, Thank God for Big Finish. Well, when I was starting out as a Doctor Who fan, of course, Best Buy was selling loads of the classic series on VHS. When I first found that section, and I was going through all the videos they had, of course I'd seen the Five Doctors at the time, so I was aware of Doctors 1 through 5, and because of the TV movie, I was aware of the seventh Doctor. Sylvester McCoy, I checked up and I was like, yeah, he was one of the official doctors. I was looking through that section when I came across episodes featuring Colin Baker. I was confused. I was like, wait a minute, who the hell is Colin Baker? Where is he fit in this? The VHS covers didn't really showcase a lot of what his wardrobe looked like, but that was like the first time I was ever cognizant that there was another doctor and his name was Colin Baker. And of course, when I see Tom Baker, Colin Baker, my first, and he had curly hair, Tom Baker had curly hair, there was a part of my brain wondering were they related? But as time went on and I did more research, I found out, okay, he came in after Peter Davison and that there was a doctor in between the two of them. And then once I was able to acclimatize to that information, I was able to realize, okay, now I have another doctor that I can jump into. And then upon realizing we had this doctor, I looked in how many years he was in the role, and I was like, ooh, that's a really brief period. And the reasons for it aren't particularly pleasant, and in fact was the start of probably one of Doctor Who's darkest periods, contrary to what a lot of people will say about what's going on nowadays. Fortunately, because Best Buy had this episode, I said, okay, I'm just going to kick off the Sixth Doctor era with the first episode of his era, The Twin Dilemma. Natural. Of course, you want to kind of jump on the Doctor the same time a lot of people jumped onto this Doctor, and it's not a bad strategy. The episode, on the other hand, some background on this one. This is actually the very rare occurrence in casting the role of the Doctor where the producer of the series pretty much directly pointed the finger and said, I want this person. Because Colin Baker had previously featured on a Fifth Doctor story, Arc of Infinity, in the role of Commander Maxwell, and he made a really strong impression with John Nathan Turner. Later on, I believe they were at a house party after a wedding where Colin Baker was the life of the party. He was very, according to John Nathan Turner, he was very charming, he was very witty, and I will definitely say in my encounters with him in various conventions, I can definitely conclude that he is a wonderful individual, and to this day, still pretty much an ambassador for Doctor Who overseas. Like, he has played a vital role in a lot of the fan clubs, and he has been a fixture at a lot of conventions. He is an incredibly wonderful person, and I greatly appreciate that about him, especially given how badly he was treated by the BBC in the wake of everything that happened for his era. If there's any simple statement that I can say that sums up all the problems with the Colin Baker era, it is great ideas, bad execution. Every idea that they were trying to do for the Sixth Doctor are wonderful ideas, especially coming after Peter Davison, who I had just said was a very down to earth, very human doctor, but also not as dynamic. And coming off a doctor like Davison, it is important that his replacement does not resemble him in any shape, way, and form. Otherwise, what's the point of recasting? And John Nathan Turner did have an idea. He wanted this Doctor to be much more tasteless, much more erratic, much more unpredictable, and even hard to be around. So for everyone who's complaining about Peter Capaldi, clearly you never watched Colin Baker, especially the way John Nathan Turner wanted him to be. If their intention was to get them to hate the Doctor, they did a pretty damn good job with this first story. How did I react to it when I first saw it? Oddly, I kind of liked it. When anything that involved what they were doing with the Doctor in this episode, I actually kind of liked. I suppose one of the perks about me jumping on with the TV movie is that I got to witness regeneration, and I got to witness that regeneration does have side effects, and that a lot of times the Doctor will be in something of a shaky state. And around the time I saw The Twin Dilemma, I believe I had already seen Spearhead from Space, and then I remembered that, yeah, even the third Doctor had some issues out of the gate. I hadn't seen The Case of Androzani at this point, so I didn't realize that the Fifth Doctor actually did have something of a traumatic regeneration, one that he didn't know whether or not he was actually going to survive. Coming off the Capes of Androzani and seeing how difficult it was for him, I will say the idea of the Sixth Doctor coming out and that he was actually unstable and even violent, I actually was really interested in that, and I did like the idea that it was going to be a rockier road compared to any of the prior times that people had to lay witness to the Doctor recovering from his regeneration. And what was even more interesting was that they actually carry this throughout this 4-part story. Unfortunately, they may have done it a little too much, to the point where they didn't really give the audience much to latch onto as far as any likable traits that this Doctor could have. Instead, they decided to just make him just this psychopathic clown. It's almost to the point, minus child murder, that they were turning him into Pennywise, because they throw him into this utterly ridiculous outfit. You put him next to Peri, who was still a new companion and still really didn't do much to establish herself and her character, unfortunately, and didn't really give much of a great impression, considering on her second go-round in the TARDIS, she ends up accidentally being the impetus behind the Fifth Doctor's death. And all she really did in Caves of Androzani was become a subject of lechery for the primary villain of that one. So, unfortunately, Peri was still not a well-established character either. So there was some really shaky ground to kick this era off on. And it really didn't help that the script in question didn't do much to give us any kind of traits about this new Doctor that audiences can click with. It seemed like they were so focused on giving us every reason to not like this Doctor that they didn't really want to focus on reasons to make him likable. I think for myself, because I was still really kind of just embracing the go anywhere spirit of Doctor Who, I was more open to the idea of this Doctor, especially compared to the Doctors I had already seen. I was more open to the idea that this Doctor was going to be a harder pill to swallow compared to the rest. So I think I was more ready to see all this stuff that they were presenting me with. And I think it's because I did so much research about everything that came after this and everything that came before this. So I guess I was able to take it more in my stride compared to a lot of people back then who were watching the show as it aired. I think it was obviously harder for them. So everything that happened when Peter Capaldi took on the role, I kind of giggled to myself because I'm like going, guys, you just experienced what a lot of people experienced when the Sixth Doctor took over. I will say this, though. I think they did a much better job with Capaldi. And I think the other problem with the way this episode is written is that you never got the vibe that they gave a shit about how the audience felt about it. Even down to the fact that the final line of the episode has the Sixth Doctor saying,
I am the Doctor, whether you like it or not.
I don't think it helps that the final line of the episode was basically John Nathan Turner and everyone saying, accept it. Doesn't work as well. I suppose we probably could have forgiven that if the story he kicked off with was anything to write home about. But unfortunately, the episode of question that we're given is involving giant slugs with big googly eyes and a pair of twins that you could tell they cast just because they were twins and not because they were in any shape, way, or form good actors. And again, it's one of those things where the story on paper is not a bad concept, especially the idea of the twins, the idea that they are children with preternaturally substantial gifts for mathematics that could, if handled incorrectly, practically rewrite the universe. But again, because the writing is so slipshod, their first scene, if the acting weren't enough, the kids are, well, they're kind of pricks. The first scene, they don't do a really good job making these kids in any way sympathetic or make us give a shit. I'd say the only two performances in the story that actually gave the story any kind of entertainment value, firstly, is Kevin McClory, who people might remember as Mr. Gibbs from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, who plays a space lieutenant, Hugo Lang, who actually has a great dynamic between Peri and the Sixth Doctor. It actually kind of made me a bit sad that he didn't stay on as a permanent companion, but they still gave him a good reason why he leaves at the end of the episode. I actually did like that he had this, doesn't take shit attitude, which really did serve good for his butting of heads with the Sixth Doctor, given his problems, and the fact that Peri actually had some kind of semblance of stability that she could click with in the TARDIS, that she didn't have to be terrified of the person she's traveling with. So he did kind of help ease things in the transition. And the other performance I will say that actually gave the story some kind of emotional core was the actor who played Asmael. Subtitle below. That's his name. When you meet Asmael in the beginning, he's known as Edgeworth. You don't really find out that he's actually Asmael until the Doctor meets him. But he kidnaps the twins. His intentions aren't really known. You definitely know that it may not actually be good. And there is this kind of layer of mystery as to why he needs these twins. And this whole mystery would be great, trying to figure out what his deal is, if he weren't surrounded by these henchmen with these peacock heads and bird faces. That wasn't exactly a triumph of design on that front. And that would be bad enough, but then you've got Mestor, the giant gastropod, this giant slug, again with these googly eyes and just like...
Indigestion? Or is it bad news?
Monsters like that had been the object of derision for the show in the times to come. Even with the new series, even Ricky Gervais took a shot at it.
Don't do it, Schlong. You leave me no alternative, Doctor.
Ricky Gervais, yeah, you were way behind on that, so shame on you. Shame on you. And Doctor Who has had a history of very silly monsters, but a lot of them you forgive because they either had a really good story or, you know, something resembling a personality. But Mestor really was just your standard megalomaniacal villain who just happened to be a giant slug, and even in the final confrontation with him is killed off practically like an afterthought. And I suppose with maybe better presentation he could have been something much more interesting, but unfortunately, given the way he's presented here, they don't do much to establish his menace. And all these things that surround the character of Asmael really kind of diminish what could have been a very strong emotional arc for the Sixth Doctor in this story that maybe you could have said helped stabilize him and probably help him finally get a better bearing on who he is as the Doctor. But because the script was written by someone who, if I'm not mistaken, actually openly said was not used to writing for science fiction, it didn't do much in order to help audiences click with this new Doctor, which for any post-regeneration story, that is the most important achievement that you have to do. You've got to focus on the thing that the audience is going to focus on, specifically how is this Doctor and how are we going to click with him. And if you're going to try something daring, you got to make sure that you cozy the audience into it in a way that they're going to be able to say for the next episode, okay, let's see what he does afterwards. I will say it also didn't help that John Nathan Turner very foolishly decided to premiere this episode as the season finale, as opposed to having this episode be the season premiere. He decided, well, we don't want people to wait for this new Doctor. We're just going to show the next episode right after the Caves of Androzani. Bad move, because Caves of Androzani is an amazing finale for the Fifth Doctor era. And then all of a sudden, you're ending your entire series with this story. When in reality, if you had kicked off the next season with this story, we would, even if people weren't on board with it for the next go, they could have said, okay, well, we'll just keep going on with the stories to see if we can cozy up to them. But unfortunately, because they ended the series with this story, and because it ends with this big to the audiences saying, accept it, and the fact that the audience had to wait like an entire year and let that stew in their brains, it left them in a really bad mindset for when the next season kicked off. And unfortunately, the next story didn't really do much to improve people's opinions either. Whereas if they had put the twin dilemma at the beginning of the season, it could have at least been something more gradual where people can just settle in and not have to let such a strongly bad impression stew in their brains for a whole year before we jumped in, and then another story comes along where you're going, oh yeah. Doesn't work out that way. So if time comes when I do another list of post-regeneration stories from worst to best or less to more, you can pretty much safely bet the Twin Dilemma will be pretty low on that list. Is it the worst? No, because I still admired the ideas that they were attempting with it. But by and large, it is a pretty silly story, and for a lot of people who want to get to know this new Doctor, it doesn't do a good job. establishing them. I definitely had a better time with it, and I definitely will say it did make me more interested to watch more with the Sixth Doctor, but I can definitely understand why a lot of people had a hard time grasping it. So do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think that this episode may have put you off Classic Who a long time ago when you were watching it for the first time? Are you someone jumping into the classic series who is reluctant to embrace the Sixth Doctor because you watched the story first? That's fine. Leave it all in the comments below. And for more addictive content on Narcotic Casserole, simply like, share, subscribe, click. Thou shalt be served.